back everyone, and let's go over today's course passage. We have a literature passage, and the title is Maggie Tulliver. Okay, let's start. George Eliot, The Early Phase. If George Eliot's first great novel, Adam Bede, is charming, there should be another description for what we find in her second, The Mill on the Floss. The fresh directness of a child's vision, which we have in The Mill on the Floss, is something very different from the stylized rememberings of an elderly narrator remembering his time as a young boy that we find in Adam Bede. The Mill on the Floss's recapturing of youthful vision is for us no doubt enchanting, but it does not idealize youth or soften with a haze of sentiment. The intensity of Maggie Tulliver's, the main character of The Mill on the Floss, naive vision is rendered with the convincing truth of genius. The novel displays the intelligence that goes with genius. This is an obvious enough point. I make it because I want to observe that although the supremely mature mind of Eliot's later Middlemarch is not yet manifested in The Mill on the Floss, the creative powers at work here owe their successes as much to a very fine intelligence as to powers of feeling and remembering. The Mill on the Floss is full of intellectual emotion, that is, the deep feelings that affect someone who is intelligent. This might be the main idea of the passage. That fact that the novel depends upon intellectual emotion is usually ignored by most readers of the novel, though it is a point that must get its full value if the development of George Eliot as a novelist is to be understood. Because, of course, at first glance, the most striking quality of The Mill on the Floss is that which goes with its strong autobiographical element. It strikes us through its simple emotional tone. The vividness, the penetration, and the irresistible truth of the best of the book are clearly bound up with this quality. To suggest that it also entails limitations that the critic cannot ignore, since they in turn are inseparable from disastrous weaknesses in George Eliot's handling of her themes, is perhaps a delicate business. But the case is so. The emotional quality represents something, a need or a hunger in George Eliot, that shows itself to be insidious company for her intelligence, apt to supplant it and take command. The novel requires that readers possess a depth of emotion and intelligence to properly appreciate it, but they must be in proper balance. Otherwise, readers are likely to make one of the novel's great strengths into one of its worst weaknesses. That Maggie Tulliver is essentially identical with the young Mary Ann Evans, George Eliot's real name, we all know. Most readers will immediately recognize that their feelings are almost identical. She has the intellectual potential for which the environment into which she was born does not provide much encouragement. She has the desperate need for affection and intimate personal relations, and above all, she has the need for an emotional exaltation, a religious enthusiasm that shall transfigure the ordinariness of daily life and sweep her up in an inspired devotion of self to some ideal purpose. There is, however, a difference between Maggie Tulliver and Marianne Evans. Maggie is triumphantly beautiful after having been the ugly duckling. The experience of a sensitive child in this role among insensitive adults is evoked with great poignancy. George Eliot had only to remember. It is in imagining the sensitive child ignored by adults that the novel most successfully balances intelligence and emotion. It is only when the sensitive child is smart enough to know that she is being ignored that her feelings are hurt. It is only then that she can reveal the damage such adults do to children and to one another. Which of the following best describes the kind of readers that the author believes are best suited to read The Mill on the Floss? Those who can identify with little girls? That's not the main idea. Clever but largely unemotional? Kind of. People who are learned and empathetic? That's a good option, more suitable. Readers of biographical novels. I would choose C overall. The author implies which of the following about George Eliot in the last paragraph? She was a skilled writer as a child. She was loved by her parents. She was not a sensitive child. She was not very good looking. There is, however, a difference between Maggie Tulliver and Mary Ann Evans. Maggie is triumphantly beautiful after having been the ugly duckling. Mary Ann was not like this. The experience of a sensitive child in this role the experience of a sensitive child in this role amongst insensitive adults is evoked with great poignancy. George Eliot had only to remember. It is in imagining the sensitive child ignored by adults that the novel most successfully balances intelligence. So, the sensitive child is ignored by adults. Following about George, she was loved by her parents. She was not a sensitive child. So it is more about so the best option is that she was not very good looking. As it says, there was a difference that Maggie is triumphantly beautiful. The primary message of the passage is that Mill on the Floss demands readers remember what growing into an adult was like, will be misunderstood if readers do not know about George Eliot's life, assumes that readers read Adam Bede before The Mill on the Floss, tells its story by engaging with the minds and hearts of its readers. I would choose D over all of them. Choice A is also a good option, so we can flag this for later. The first paragraph, the author implies that Adam Bede, if George Eliot's first great novel, Adam Bede, is charming, there should be another description for what we find in our second. The fresh directness of a child's vision, which we have in The Mill, is something very different from the stylized remembrance of an elderly narrator remembering his time as a young boy that we find in. So in Adam Bede, the elderly narrator remembers his time as a young boy. But in Mill on the Floss, uh, uh, there's a difference. There's a directness of a child's vision. So the meal on the floss for capturing of youthful vision is for us, no doubt, enchanting. But it doesn't idealize youth or soften with a haze of sentiment. It doesn't have a good, positive look on youth. So the author implies that Adam Bede portrays youth in a positive light. Yes. Is a funny book with tragic moments. Is considered a work of genius. Has a narrator who speaks of his regrets. No, it's remembering of a young boy. The meal on the floss, but it doesn't idealize youth. It means that Adam Bede does. Which of the following statements is inconsistent with information in the passage? George Eliot viewed The Mill on the Floss as a more personally meaningful book for her than Adam Bede. That's consistent. Eliot crafted her book to teach the emotionally immature how to appreciate the complex feelings of others. That's also consistent. There are nuances to the plot of George Eliot's book that were designed to test how smart her readers were. So these nuances of George Eliot's book were designed to test how smart her readers were, kind of. Yes, there's a talk about intelligence. Children find The Mill on the Floss both easy to relate to and very difficult to fully comprehend. Is full of intellectual emotion, that is, deep feelings that affect someone who is intelligent. There are nuances to the plot. How to appreciate the complex feelings of others. It's not about the emotionally immature on how to appreciate the complex feelings of others. It's not about teaching the emotionally immature. That's my guess. Let's see. That is correct. That is correct. That is correct. That is correct. And that is correct. Boom. We got 100% on this one. People who are learned and empathetic. Which of the following best, and this was while we read it out loud, so you can possibly figure it out that we could score 5 out of 5 on this in less than 10 minutes. The goal would be in 8.5 minutes because we have only 5 questions. So which of the following best describes the kind of readers that the author, so this is what happens when you fully understand and take the important messages of the passage into your head, right? You think that you kind of did not understand it, but yeah, just read the full passage with full emotions, and you will get the ideas, the main ideas of the passage. And what would be the main idea of this passage is that this is a tricky one. I have struggled with coming up with the main ideas. For me, the main idea of the passage is George Eliot's Mill on the Floss. Is full of intellectual emotion. Or portrays, we had a primary message, engaging with the minds and hearts of the readers. So George Eliot's Mill on the Floss engages with the minds, and the Mill on the Floss requires emotion and intelligence to be in proper balance. Let's see, that's a good summary. It wants emotion and to be on the balance. Sure. why did only 50% of people get this question right? Eliot crafted her book to teach the emotionally immature how to. This answer contradicts the main idea of the passage. The main idea is that Mill on the Floss requires emotional intelligence to be in proper balance. In paragraph 2, it says the meal on the floss is full of intellectual emotion. Paragraph 3 states that the novel depends on this intellectual emotion. Paragraph 5 claims that it requires the readers possess a depth of emotion and intelligence to properly appreciate it. The last paragraph says that the novel successfully balances intelligence and emotion. An idea that goes against this would suggest that readers are not required to appreciate the level of emotion and intelligence in the novel. This answer describes the people reading Eliot's book as emotionally immature. This directly opposes the idea that readers of the mill should have emotional depth. It suggests that the book does not demand the ability to understand emotion upon reading it, since it teaches those who are emotionally immature. Thus, this answer is inconsistent with the passage discussion. Okay, Cole. This was not a hard passage. And now I like to go on the hard words or difficult words that I like to learn more about in a passage. So I'll just go quickly over it. Stylized rememberings. Let's see. I didn't know this is how you write naive, but good to notice that. Is rendered with the convincing truth of genius, the novel displays the intelligence. This is obvious enough point. Insidious. That shows itself to be insidious company. Apt to supplant. I know apt means enough to supplant it and take command. The novel requires that but they must be in proper balance. So we can see here that the main idea was taken from here. The novel requires the readers possess a depth of emotion and intelligence to properly appreciate it, but they must be in proper balance. Otherwise, readers are likely to make one of the novel's great strengths into one of its worst weaknesses. For an emotional exaltation. That shall transfigure. It shall transfigure the ordinariness of daily life and sweep her up in an inspired devotion. Maggie is triumphantly beautiful. Triumphant means successful, right? After being the ugly duckling. Duckling. Evoked with great poignancy. What is evoked? The experience of a sensitive child in this role among sensitive adults is her experience with adults is evoked with poignancy. Okay, perfect. Now, let's see how we get answers for this. Stylized refers to something that's designed, depicted, or presented in a highly artistic or exaggerated manner, often departing from reality for artistic effect. So we see that here Meal on the Floss is something very different from the stylized rememberings of an elderly narrator, right? It means it's very artistic. Insidious implies something harmful or deceitful that operates gradually or subtly, often in a way that's not immediately obvious or easily detected. In this context, insidious company could refer to influences or ideas that are subtly damaging or manipulative to her intelligence. So, yeah, we have insidious that is like harmful or deceitful. So that shows itself to be insidious company for her intelligence. But the case is the emotional quality represents something, a need for a hunger in George Eliot that shows itself to be insidious company for her intelligence, apt to supplant it. Enough to a tendency or capability to replace something and gain control over it. So it implies a certain capability or quality that allows for usurping authority or influence. supersede and replace. So it was enough to replace it and take command, take control. Supplant means replace, supplant. Another discovery could supplant the original finding. Replace and usurp its authority. Take illegally or by force. Usurp. Richard usurped the throne. Emotional exaltation refers to a state of intense and heightened emotion, often associated with joy, elation, or uplifted feelings. So emotional exaltation is an upbeat state of intense, heightened emotion, and it's associated with joy, elation, and uplifted feelings. So a feeling or state of extreme happiness, exaltation. She beams with exaltation. It should not be the same as exalted. Is exalt a different? Does exalted have a different meaning than exaltation? It shall transfigure the ordinariness of daily life and sweep her up in inspired devotion. Implies that something, possibly an experience or influence, will transform the mundane aspects of everyday life into something extraordinary and captivating for her, invoking a deep sense of dedication or passion. Sweep her up. Sweeping means like mopping the floor, right? Alludes to the classic story of the ugly duckling, symbolizing someone or something initially overlooked or underestimated, but eventually transformed into something beautiful or remarkable. Poignancy suggests that her interactions or encounters with adults evoke strong and deeply felt emotions, likely tinged with a sense of sadness, nostalgia. Poignancy is the quality of evoking a keen sense of sadness or regret. Poignancy has a negative tone. The pregnancy has a special poignancy for her family. When it's poignant, it means that it's sad. It comes from pathos, sadness, poignancy. The fact that he was soon to die gave his words a special poignancy. Sadness, pitifulness, misery. Yes, exalted and exaltations are different. Exalted is an adjective that describes a person or thing that is raised or elevated in status, rank, or dignity. It refers to something that is held in high regard, esteemed or revered. For example, an exalted position in society means a highly respected or prestigious role. I mean, it's the same thing. Exaltation is a noun to the act of elevating someone. For some reason, I thought exalted means that a person, one is deported. For example, you say the Shah of Iran was exalted from the country. But yeah, I think that's a different meaning. Then why did I think exalt means when someone is deported out of a country? The word exalt actually does not mean being deported out of country. There might be mix up with another term. Oh, it was exile. So it's exiled. Had different meanings. The term you might be thinking of regarding living country is exiled. Exile refers to the state of being barred or expelled from one's own country or home, typically for political reasons or as a punishment. Exile involves being forced to live away from one's native country or residence. Perfect. So we have everything covered, and I'll stop this now, and we'll be back soon.